So they started noticing that women were having henna parties. So they started thinking through, wouldn't it be interesting if we incorporated designs into the henna that could tell Bible stories?
I love that.
And so they started looking at ways of creating designs that told, the story of the woman who met Jesus at a well.
Yeah.
And so they developed a whole set of stories.
Wow.
Because a lot of women overseas are illiterate. And so, and even if they can read, their heart language is story.
Right.
And this created like such an open door to the gospel.
Let's go!
You're listening to the Marked Podcast. This is a podcast for women who are marked by a love for God, His Word, and His people. Friends, today is such a treat because we have two incredible women joining us on the podcast, Tina Boesch and Dr. Kelly King. Yes, both of these women are not only gifted leaders, but they are accomplished writers. Tina is the author of Given, The Forgotten Meaning and Practice of Blessing, and she has a rich background in theology, holding a master's degree from Regent College in Vancouver, and she served 19 years overseas.
Well, Angie, actually, I know Dr. Kelly King from way back when, like 20 years ago.
You've known her for a while.
Right. As a matter of fact, she was the one that told me to apply for this women's ministry specialist position.
That's right.
Isn't that wild?
Right. Yep.
But you know what? She's not only has been a women's ministry specialist, but she has also authored a really helpful handbook for women's ministry leaders entitled Ministry to Women, The Essential Guide for Leading in the Local Church. This is one of those books that I actually often use even in my seminary classes when I was teaching women's ministry. But she also holds a master's in theology from Gateway Seminary.
Yep.
And I got the opportunity to be second chair on her doctoral degree that is also focused in ministry. So
that's cool.
But you know what? Her title just keeps on going.
I know. She's a very accomplished woman.
Right. She's like teaching at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. And she's also a ministry director at her church.
At her local church. And it's just so fun for me to have Kelly back in the studio because if you are a longtime listener to Marked, you'll know Kelly as a former co-host of Marked. And so it was really an honor for me to get to interview her today.
Oh.
What I love about Tina as well is that she brings such a beautiful global perspective from her years overseas. And while Kelly brings this incredible practical wisdom from the local church, together they make a real powerhouse team for us today. So we're excited.
Well, we cannot wait to hear, for all the listeners to hear from both of these ladies. And so let's dive in with our conversation with Tina Boesch and Kelly King. Hey, Kelly and Tina, thank you for coming. So excited you guys are here. Kelly, I know you and I have discussed missions before. And so I wanted you to come on this podcast to share with us a little bit about how you incorporate missions into your women's ministry, and why is that even an important part of women's ministry? Can you share with us a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. Well, I do think it's kind of like breathing. We have to breathe in and we have to breathe out. And we a lot of times in women's ministry, we will really focus on Bible studies and we focus on events. And those are great. I love those things, but that's really the taking in part. But when you incorporate the missions part, it's the helping people see outside of themselves. It's the breathing out. It's what God is already doing in you. Now go serve. Go make this happen because that's part of your life sanctification and transformation. So I do think whenever you can incorporate that within your ministry, it's helping women kind of see beyond themselves.
What are some of those things that you feel like women get out of it? You're like, they're breathing out, but when they go on a mission trip in your local ministry, what does that look like for them coming back?
As far as them just, how do they get involved or maybe what that looks like, sometimes, and we can talk more about this, even like what are the things that you can incorporate. Sometimes they just don't know what they need to do. And so you've got to help kind of give them some framework of, hey, here's some opportunities, or make it really easy. So in our Bible studies this fall, I encourage every Bible study leader, like, yes, I'm glad you're doing this study, but within this study, how are you going to give back? Is there something that we can do? And so I help them pick a project, whatever that might look like in our church or outside of our church and local ministry. So we try to keep it pretty local. Right. And so, this year I've kind of given them a directive of like, hey, we're trying to do this particular thing. And so let's work on that. I have a large event next week. And so even in an event, how do you incorporate that breathing out? And so we will take up an offering for a certain mission project that is in North Africa. And it is for a woman from our church who is serving there, and how she's going to be serving the poorest of the poor in her community. And when women see the pictures, they know the person, they just say, yes, absolutely. And so they get to be part of something that's bigger than themselves.
Right. I love that. So many times when we think of missions, we think of like, okay, you've got to give up everything in the U.S. and then you're heading overseas. Now, we do have someone that did that for 19 years. And so I do want to bring in Tina. But when you're starting out in women's ministry and you do not know anything, like you're a new believer, you don't have any clue, it is really nice to be able to start small and to do it collectively together, right? And introduce that and pray and allow God to develop that heart and desire for missions, whether it's to give, whether it's to pray, or whether it's to go, that all of those things are incorporated some way, somehow into our women's ministry. So important.
And you can make it really easy. I think about, last year, the event that we did, we actually had Jen Wilkin at our event, and I kind of knew like her passion is biblical literacy.
Right.
So I have several elementary school principals in my particular church, in my congregation. And so I started asking them, like, tell me about the literacy, just actual literacy in the schools. And so I found out some things like about that. And so we asked women, we were like, hey, when you come to this event, either bring a new book, children's book, or bring even a gently used one. And we're going to give them to the principals that are already in our church. And I had one of the principals on stage explaining what they do and how it impacts little children in our community. And I had so many books in my office, and I was just like, okay, we have got to divide these up and get them out, but what a blessing.
Right.
And that was easy.
Right.
That was easy.
That was. And it's so helpful that they can feel like they're part of something. And in terms of understanding even the mission of God. And so starting small, starting local, together. And so we're going to look at, okay, so now when we're thinking globally, how does that look? And what does that mean? And so, Tina, can you share a little bit about what that has been like? What are some ways in which the church or women's ministry can really help look at this in a global factor, not just local in their area, but bring that even a bigger picture? What are some ways that women's ministry can help with that?
Yeah, absolutely. In Matthew 28, when Jesus says and sends the disciples out and says, go and make disciples of all nations. So nations there is not what we think of as nation states. It is ethnic groups. It's people groups. And I think understanding and just being aware that there still are hundreds, if not thousands of people groups that still have no access at all to the gospel of Jesus Christ. Nurturing, just being aware of that and being intentional in our prayers for the people groups. The International Mission Board has great daily resources for praying for a people group every day. So sometimes we think, prayer, can it really work? Absolutely. It's foundational to our faith. And I do actually think missions vision starts there.
Right.
Intentionality in prayer, praying for the people groups, also praying for the persecuted church, being aware that we have brothers and sisters who are in places where they can't worship in the way that we are, that we can. Being aware that when we're looking at the global news, we could look through the lens of what is God doing in that place in this time.
Wow.
Can I pray for the believers who are, for instance, if I'm watching a news story about Iran, there are believers in Iran. Can we pray for the persecuted church there? Can we pray for what the Lord may be doing in that place? When we're looking at, stories about Israel or North Africa or wherever, or China,
Yeah.
realizing that, okay, Lord, what are you doing in this place? I'm watching the news. I can either get mad or I can say, Lord, help me pray
Right.
in accordance with your will. That's a great way to start.
Right.
To
Tina,
just begin to have a global vision.
Can I just share a story about how prayer affected me when I was overseas and serving overseas? I remember very vividly, I was going from village to village. We're kind of like doing GPS, kind of figuring out what villages needed the gospel. And so I remember being lost as lost can be. Like I didn't know what village we were in, and there were only 5 of us. So we were just trekking all throughout, And I remember we had no more food. We ran out of food. We ran out of funds. We ran out, and we're like, Lord, we don't know what to do. And in that time, this little villager comes out and just say, in my broken Mandarin, because I speak Cantonese more in my broken Mandarin, he figured out, he's like, come to my place to eat. And I did not know, but he literally cooked us a whole big giant meal. We had no food, no money at that time because we were in the middle of 2 villages and we used up all the funds, and we were going to meet some some other workers that were going to help fund us again because we were working for an organization. And literally he would put a bowl of rice and the flies would just cover it. Okay. And we just had to dig deep. But in the middle of that, it was God's provision.
Yep.
And the reason for that was there was someone in the U.S. that woke up at 3 a.m. in the morning. And so when I had come back or something, they said, you know what? I was praying intensely for an hour for you at 3 a.m. in the morning, and it was on this day. Do you know why God just woke me up? I could not sleep, so I just started praying for you for some reason. And it was that day regarding that time when we were able to meet this villager. So prayer, we cannot underestimate the power of prayer. And you have stories, right? I'm sure you have stories about prayer.
Oh, absolutely. And when I think about the power of prayer too, I think about the essential nature of communicating those prayers to the people who may be sent out from our churches. If you start anywhere, start with the workers, the Christian, the missionaries, the workers who are sent out from your church or from churches in your community.
Right.
Because I can't tell you, we just recently had some global workers at our home church, and honestly, and I can say from 19 years, this is true, you send out a newsletter and you literally get no response whatsoever. I can remember the names of the people who responded consistently to our newsletters and said, I am praying this for you right now. It means everything for workers who are there long term, engaging the nations. We cannot do this. We cannot do mission alone. It takes the whole church.
That's such an encouragement. And, this is a really easy way to, because as far as like even praying, that pastor's wife shared this with me. And because I think we can tell people like, pray for the nations, and they go, I don't even know where to start. And there are good resources, but she taught me that when I get dressed in the morning, look at my tags and see where my clothing was made, because most often it's going to be made in a country where there may be missionaries and just the need for the gospel. And so look at your tag. If it's Thailand, you pray for Thailand. If it's Bangladesh, you pray for Bangladesh. And that has been an easy way for me just to connect prayer to something really simple. And so I think it is, there's lots of ways to pray.
Yes.
Ladies, we are basing this season of Marked on the 5 pillars of women's ministry. And so I would love to hear from the two of you. How do you feel like missions fits into those 5 pillars? Why is it essential that we don't leave that pillar out of our women's ministry. Kelly, let's start with you.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and it does go back to the whole breathing in and breathing out a little bit of there's kind of this, we're taught, scripture says that we should, take the gospel to the nations. So it is. There's another part, and I think there's a distinction sometimes, and Tina, you probably can even articulate this better, but there is a difference between maybe even missions and ministries a little bit because we serve others. Missions is always tied to evangelism, in my opinion. And so how is it spreading the gospel? How are we doing that? And helping people and helping women especially see that there is a great need. There is a great need, and there are so many people that are lost and dying without Jesus. So I think helping them understand that a little bit, you might even articulate that better.
Right. When I think about mission, I'm especially thinking about the way that Paul talks about this in Romans, at the end of the letter of the Romans. He writes that letter to a church he does not know and did not plant because he has a desire to go to Spain to preach the gospel where it is not known. I think we miss something when we think of mission as outside of preaching the gospel where it is not known. Now, are there pockets in our own communities where it is not known? For sure, there are. But there is a special and unique calling to go cross-culturally, to learn language, to be an incarnational, meaning a witness in the flesh to the gospel. Internet evangelism is amazing. My husband has a passion for that, but it is no substitute for incarnational witness.
Right.
We still need people who are there in the flesh to talk about who Jesus is in the language of the people with sensitivity to their culture. And that, I think, ultimately is what mission is. Now, if there are so many ways women have been absolutely strategic and instrumental, both by going, but also by supporting. I mean, when I think about the legacy of women, I'm Southern Baptist, so I'm thinking especially about the legacy of Lottie Moon, who was one of our missionaries who was sent before in the late 19th century to minister in China.
Right.
And she ultimately needed prayer support initially. So there was a group of women who were mobilizing prayer for her. But ultimately she realized, hey, we need financial support to be able to stay long term. And so there was a group of women who got together and started an offering, which ultimately became, named in her honor, the Lottie Moon Christmas Offering. That offering, which has been supported for more than 100 years by the Women's Missionary Union, provides more than half of the operating budget for the International Mission Board, one of the largest sending agencies in the world.
Wow,
That's
amazing.
incredible. And that's so biblical. When Jesus was ministering, we know from the Gospel of Luke that there were some women traveling with him, Joanna, Susanna, Mary, and they are supporting him through their financial means. Women have been supporting mission financially since the origin of Jesus' ministry with the disciples, and they have continued that support historically. And y'all, we cannot minimize that. And missionaries can't stay both with prayer support and financial support. It's a really, really important part of actually engaging in global mission.
And I think we don't even always talk a lot about the importance of women overseas, but when you see the number, and especially single women who are going to very difficult places. And so if we can come along beside them and hold the rope, so to speak, that's the term we use, of how we pray for them and how we support them, I think sometimes we minimize just the impact that women are making all over the world.
Tina, even as you referenced the Lottie Moon Christmas Offering, it takes me back to my childhood because I was giving to the Lottie Moon Christmas Offering as a child. I can remember very distinctly being asked to bring in change or whatever we had as children to contribute to that. And I think that that's a really good point because, before we jumped into this conversation, I mentioned to you guys that my mission experience is limited to a few things, right? But the truth is, if I sat down and really took inventory of my own contribution, prayers, experiences around missions, I might find that it's a little more extensive than I would think on the surface. And so it makes me want to encourage our listeners to do that. Let's just take a minute to take some inventory about what is your experience with missions and then say, how could I do a little bit more? Like, let's just stretch it just a little bit more. I loved, Kelly, what you were talking about earlier, that you use missions in your event or you take advantage of your events to draw attention to missions. My church does that as well. And we rotate a different mission cause every event. Do you do it that as well?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So
it
it
depends on
doesn't-
what the event is. Maybe
Yes.
if there's a certain emphasis that's happening or a connection. So we really pray about what does that look like?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I love it. At our church, we supported local missions in that we bring diapers for our pregnancy center, or we've contributed to missionaries who live in Africa that are affiliated with our church. So we've done a lot of different things too, and I have always participated in that. So I'm going to do that. I'm just telling you guys, when I leave here, I really am going to take some time to look through the way I have interacted with missions. And one of the things we say at our church, and I love this, is when you are giving to our church, you're not giving to, you're giving through.
Right.
And it really gives me a comfort level knowing that my church is contributing to the Lottie Moon Christmas offering, and I'm contributing through that. And so that's such a good, reassuring thing.
What I'm hearing too from the both of you is that there's an intentionality about missions in our ministry. We need to clarify and just say we are giving to missions and not just like, oh, we're just helping these people, but that is part of our DNA to always be thinking about not just locally, but also globally, and how to incorporate that in the events that we do, in the Bible studies that we do, in the ministry, that is a part of, and one of those pillars that we can always be incorporating and thinking through. But there's intentionality behind it. It's not just like, oh, it's a thing that we've always done, so we're going to keep on doing it. I think, or we've just always donated to this organization, but to really pray through and think through, okay, which missionaries are we praying through? Be very specific and strategic and intentional about missions in our women's ministry. I think that would be super helpful. And Tina, you shared about giving, praying, giving, and then of course we need to talk about going, What are some stories of you've seen impact of women who have just even served overseas that have really impacted women's ministry, perhaps, in the way we can even think about it differently?
Man, there are just so many. There's one that I love. There was, so my first experience overseas as a missionary was as a journeyman in Bulgaria. And the journeyman program is a 2-year program. And it's interesting when you get young women coming out, they just come with so many new ideas.
Right.
So I remember one journeyman who was serving in South Asia, and she noticed that women were, in India and South Asia, henna is so beautiful, very intricate designs that women do the night before a wedding. But they'll also sometimes do it for special occasions. It's almost like going to get a really beautiful manicure. So they started noticing that women were having henna parties. So they started thinking through, wouldn't it be interesting if we incorporated designs into the henna that could tell Bible stories?
I love that.
And so they started looking at ways of creating designs that told the story of the woman who met Jesus at a well.
Yeah.
And so they developed a whole set of stories.
Wow.
Because a lot of women overseas are illiterate. And so, and even if they can read, their heart language is stories.
Right.
And this created like such an open door
Neat.
to the gospel. But then that method was one that ended up being so visual and so non-threatening for evangelism that I saw her come home and begin to do that in local schools.
Wow.
So if you have a fall festival, set up a henna booth so that you can and tell the story. It was a method that we used where I was serving in Central Asia. There's a pilgrimage route, and these are Muslims mostly coming in. We would have you can do creation to Christ. There are a lot of different stories. It ended up becoming a whole website that was globally available. And the reality is telling the story of the Bible, being able to do that, both discrete stories that we might meet in the gospel, just introducing someone to Jesus, but then also giving people a view of Genesis to creation, building confidence. That's one of those methods that I've seen work overseas beautifully, but then also be able to have an impact, even in women's ministry in the States, in this very creative, very beautiful, very feminine way.
Yeah,
I
that's pretty
remember
special.
doing this.
Yeah.
And we, even at an event, and so we had printed off some of the henna patterns. But one of the things that I learned personally in my own community was to set this up, I had to go to a special store that would have the right henna. And it took me to a part of my own community that I had never stepped into that store and it was a cultural experience. And sometimes I think even just, you don't even have to go overseas. Go in your community and find a grocery store for a certain, ethnic group or whatever it looks like. And it really does open your eyes to, oh, this is in my city, or this is in my area. Now, if you live in a small town, you're not going to have that. But if you're in a larger metropolitan area, it's likely you're going to have a variety of different ethnic foods. I mean, Tita, you're so good about, you'll go and find different restaurants. And I'm so... And Alicia, you and I have shared a meal. And she's like, okay, here's this. And I'm like, I've never had this before, but I'm going to try it. And it helps you at least expand your horizons in your mind a little bit to other, people groups.
I love that. When I'm thinking about all the things that we're talking about here with missions, I think about how missions really is. It encompasses all of the 5 pillars, if you think about it. And so I would love to hear, especially about community. How have you seen missions with the women in your church build community amongst them?
Oh, yeah. Because when you serve together, you have the stories.
That's right.
And there's that shared experience. And that can be even, like you said, whether it's maybe even serving in a pregnancy center nearby. That we did something just with some of the women in our church last year. And we were, there was just a few of us, 3 or 4. But that will be a memory for me of what we did together.
Yeah.
And so that you create that community.
And you just get to know people in a way you never would. I mean, especially a trip. We all know that. When you've traveled with someone, it definitely opens up a portal to a new kind of friendship.
And there's even mentoring that happens. I remember going to another country. I had taken my 14-year-old daughter. It was her first trip overseas. And that's a story in itself. But there were 2 senior adult women that we shared kind of a guest house bunk room together. And I'm sure that my daughter will never forget what it was like to be around those women in their 60s at the time. For a 14-year-old, that was a lot of just learning and watching and seeing what they were doing.
Right.
As it relates to stories and community, one of the things I think women don't realize in the States a lot of times is that women who have been serving overseas for a long time, when they come back on stateside assignment, a lot of times people want to hear the extraordinary stories of God at work. And there can be some. But because so much of missions work is happening right now in restricted access countries where there's a lot of limitations on what women can do, where they can go, who they can talk to, especially if women are serving in a Muslim context or really traditional context. The truth is, a lot of women will come back exhausted, traumatized in some ways. And it is hard for them to tell those stories, but they need to tell their stories. They need an invitation to talk. In the 19 years that we served overseas, I can remember being on stateside assignments where almost no one asked me, about people I knew, things that were hard. There were very few opportunities and open doors to actually talk at a heart level.
Okay.
And I think that is
That's
a
good.
challenge. We do really need to create space for people and welcome and invitation for women who are serving long-term overseas to be a part of our community at the heart level, knowing that their experiences are really different and the experiences of their children are really different. So enabling their children to feel seen and heard and feel like they have an opportunity to talk about what they've been experiencing too. It's just so important. We stayed in a mission house for 6 months at one church, wonderful church. I got to teach there. I got to serve. We only had dinner with one family. It was a family who had served in another restricted access nation because Americans are busy. And overseas, we were in homes all the time. And so my kids would ask me, Mom, why doesn't anyone have time to have dinner? Like, why haven't we been in any homes? Because when we were serving in Central Asia, we were invited into homes all the time.
Right.
One family literally that we were driving through their town invited us over, and their whole family slept on the couches so we could sleep in their beds while they had us in their homes.
Wow.
And my kids just didn't experience hospitality like that in the States.
Yeah.
And just the time to talk about their experiences or even the curiosity to ask. A lot of times I know people don't know where to start. So simple things like, what is your favorite thing to eat over there? Tell me about one friend that you have. You know, the ability for women to have to be able to share their stories is really important. Both the exciting things about what God is doing, but also the really hard things that they've experienced and need prayer for.
And that's inspiring to me, because as you were saying, we really need the opportunity to share. I thought, well, how do we do that? So thanks for giving us ideas for how to enter into those conversations.
And even college students who are studying, maybe if you're in a university town, the percentage is really high of the number of international students who come here and are never invited to a meal with a family that's here.
That's right.
And I remember my son bringing a young guy over when he was in college, and I think he was from South Korea. I can't remember exactly. And he wanted to see our backyard, and I was like, okay. And so he went out, came back in, and I said, why did you want to see our backyard? What? And he said, well, I grew up. We would watch reruns of the Cosby Show or other television shows where it showed people's backyards. And he said, I just wanted to see if it looked like that. And I was like, did it look like that? And he said, it kind of did. And I was I never thought about that.
I'll tell you a story. So where we served was a mega city. And so we walked out of our apartment and we were on a city street. So, if you're thinking about kind of the New York City of Central Asia, that's where we lived. And that's where two of my three children were born. And so when my son, Micah, who's 15 now, was about 4, we went back to visit my sister who was living in an Atlanta suburb at the time. And we woke up the first night in her house. In the morning, we woke up. Micah hadn't seen the house before because we had come in the night. So we wake up and he looks out the window and he says, Mom, can I go to the park? And I was like, the park? What do you mean? He's like, right there, the park. And I realized she had a swing set in her backyard. And where we were serving, the only place you saw swing sets was city parks.
Right.
Like no one had a yard. The only place you'd see a swing set was at the park. So he sees a swing set and he thinks, this is a park. Like we're at a park. It's those kinds of transitions that you just don't realize their context can be very, very different.
So I would love for you guys, we've only got a couple of minutes left, but there are ministry leaders listening who are thinking, I really want to engage in missions more with the women that I lead. What are just a couple of things that you would say you can do right away?
Yeah. You want to jump in, Tina?
Right away, I would say if you have any folks serving from your local community who have been sent, get to know them, get to know what are their main prayer requests, what are their primary needs, how can we serve them if they're going to be home on stateside assignment. how can we love their family well, and really invite them into the. So I would say start there. Start with the folks that are sent. Secondly, I would say get to know. There really are some excellent prayer resources. Get to know them. That's a good place to start to discern where is the Lord leading our church to engage if we're not already engaged in some way.
Yeah, that's good. We'll link to some prayer resources in the show notes too. That's good.
Kelly, do you have some?
I was thinking too, I'm thankful for just even that global perspective, but even on a local perspective, if you're even a new leader, try to find out what's already happening in your church, because I guarantee you there are women who are passionate about different things in your community. So you don't have to invent something or create something new. Just partner with women who are already passionate about a certain thing. So maybe that's a local school, and maybe it's, you're filling backpacks, or you are, maybe helping a pregnancy center. There are probably women who are already doing some things. So have your, antenna up around your local church and find out where those things are happening.
And if you do have women who are passionate about those things locally, a lot of times it's possible to find a sister ministry that's similar internationally.
Right.
So if you're concerned about trafficking, there are a lot of ways through Send Relief to contribute to ministries that help rescue women from women and girls and boys from trafficking. If you're interested in clean water, if you're interested in Bible translation, there are ministries that your local women's ministry could, think about, fundraisers, things like that, where you have a missional aspect to what you're doing to support work that's being done overseas. Often that long-term support, both financial and prayer, can lead to partnerships that give you that connection, which also lead to short-term going, to be actually involved in what's happening overseas. And that's a great on-ramp to work, to mission work. Yeah,
I would definitely encourage in the show notes to put the links to Send Relief and even like WMU, their World Crafts, a portion of that. Those are things that really do help women in other countries.
That's awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It was so great to talk about mission, y'all.
Yay.
This should be a part of the DNA
Right.
of every women's ministry, because it's part of the DNA of the church.
Right. Angie, I had so much fun talking with these ladies. They are such a wealth of information, and just the passion they have to incorporate missions into their ministry. And then, of course, with Tina, who served overseas.
Yeah, so inspiring.
Right.
So inspiring.
Well, we also mentioned several resources that I think would be really helpful to our listeners, and I know one of the books that Dr. Kelly King, I always forget to say her doctor.
She earned that doctorate.
Right. She actually wrote a book called Ministry to Women. And it's actually an essentials handbook for women's ministry leaders. I even use that in my seminary classes because it's a great how-to.
I love it. Who doesn't want to learn from Kelly King?
Right.
And speaking of learning from Kelly King, we have a free Lifeway Women Academy session from Kelly King on the Lifeway Women blog, but we're going to link that in the show notes so you can access it really easily. So check that out. Also, just some other resources that you guys might want to know about.
Right.
We have a couple of Elizabeth Elliot biographies available from B&H. We're linking those in the show notes. I personally read one of them, and they're so good.
Right.
So I want to encourage you guys to check that out.
And what missionary would not have read Elizabeth Elliot, right?
No, right?
Or Jim Elliot, for that matter.
For sure. Yeah.
Right. So, yeah. And then the other book you mentioned was The 10 Women Who Changed the World.
That's right.
Is that?
By Dr. Danny Aiken.
Yeah.
It's such a good one. So inspiring. Some really great stories in that book about women, especially in the realm of missions. And then tell us about the prayer resource that Tina mentioned.
Right. So IMB has these wonderful resources on prayer. And I know that Tina had mentioned earlier about incorporating prayer, and to find out ideas, sometimes we struggle. How do we do that in our ministry? And I think going on that website would be super helpful for them to find out, hey, these are some creative ways that we can incorporate prayer into our ministry. But you know what? Sometimes, Angie, people struggle with what projects should we do? Where do we go find these projects? what's a trusted resource? Well, Send Relief has some amazing projects that they do,
cool.
from helping women who are being trafficked to buying a goat, to help a community. They have all of these things, that projects for people to help give financially, but also to go and serve in some of these areas. So those are some really great resources to tap into.
That's great. And as I mentioned, these are all linked in the show notes so you can find them easily. We are so grateful that you have tuned in to us today. You've listened to the show. If someone came to mind as you were listening, please send this episode to them. Maybe if we work together and we share this message, we can get our women's ministry directors, our leaders, really more focused on missions. And I loved what Kelly said in this episode today. It really is about breathing it in and breathing it out. And we all want to be more mission-minded.
Right.
So thank you for joining us. We'll see you back here next week.
Bye.
Let's go!
Marked is a production of Lifeway Podcast, executive produced by Angie Elkins, produced by Aaron Franklin, and engineered by Donnie Gordon. It's recorded in the Lifeway Podcast studio in Brentwood, Tennessee, and edited by Caleb Hoopengarner, with art by Lauren Irvin and music by Raven McKelvey and Robert Elkins. I'm your host, Angie Elkins, along with Alicia Wong. If you want to join in on the conversation, you can always find us on social media at Lifeway Women. Today's show notes will be posted at lifewaywomen.com/marked. If you enjoyed the show, leave us a review. Meet us back here next week.
We're diving in to Marked. Let's go! Life on the go, and we're ready to grow. Get up, get out, get on the way. Can't wait to hear what they're gonna say. Hope for everyone. Ministry to motherhood. Come as you are, engage your heart. We know just where to start. We're marked by grace and by mercy. We're marked with hope for eternity. Ready for some weekly encouragement. Turn it on and up and I'm going in. We're marked by peace and by unity. We're marked and made for community. Go on a walk, let's have a talk. We're diving in to Marked.